Welcome to the Prosperous Musician. My name's Spence, and I'm with a very special guest here today. It's Jonny Venvall from Encore for Musicians, and I'm really glad Jonny can join us today. Hello, Jonny. You're in the UK, right?
I am indeed. Thanks, Spence. It's really great to be on your show. Thanks for having me. I'm sitting in my sitting room in North London, UK.
The wonders of modern technology. I'm talking to you here from Oslo, and yeah, we were just chatting before all this started about the situation, the COVID situation, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because I'm a customer of yours, if you like. I'm a musician, and I've had quite a few gigs via Encore, and I thought it'd be a great thing to share with the audience, people who are other, professional musicians as well, based in the UK, who may not have heard of you. So, yeah, just tell us how Encore, what Encore is, first of all, what you offer, and how it got started, and what's your role in Encore.
Sure. Encore is a platform for booking musicians across the UK of all types. We have wedding bands, function bands, string quartets, but typically we're matching people that want to book musicians for weddings or corporate functions or birthday parties with those types of musicians. We started in 2014. It was founded by a couple of computer science graduates from Cambridge, both called James King and James Macaulay, and both of them musicians as well. So James Macaulay is a cellist, and he became the CEO, and James King is a very good classical pianist, and he became the CTO, so he's in charge of the tech side of the platform. But they came together actually at Entrepreneur First, which is a startup accelerator. And the initial proposal, I suppose, for the platform was to try to create something that could help their friends who were starting out in the music industry. James Macaulay in particular, a very accomplished cellist, has lots of friends who were going away to the Royal Academy of Music or the Royal College of Music to become professional musicians. But at that point in time, there didn't really exist a single platform for musicians to post their musical credentials and also get gig opportunities. There are also a number of issues that we wanted to solve around how musicians get booked for gigs. So the key area really was payment and making sure musicians got fair pay and also got paid on time. So from the start, we decided to set minimum rates for how much people were getting booked on the platform, and also to take money from clients before musicians went out to do gigs. So musicians on Encore essentially always get paid fairly and get paid on time. So that's the kind of musician proposal. And then for the clients, I guess the proposal is any musician anywhere in the UK for your event. With regards to my role, I'm head of artist relations. I joined a year after it was founded. I studied music myself, and I'd been playing oboe in an orchestra with James Macaulay, and we got chatting, and I joined as an intern to begin with, and then kind of became the first employee in the very early stages, and have been there ever since, and really enjoying it. That's Encore in a nutshell.
Great. So it's starting off predominantly with the wedding market in mind, but it seems like there's more services that you offer at the moment. So can you tell us a bit about how it's kind of grown and where you're at the moment with your services?
Sure. When the pandemic hit, we realised that we needed to diversify our offerings a little bit. Most weddings in the last few months have been cancelled. So in February, we would be booking a few hundred gigs every month. And then suddenly we were cancelling a few hundred gigs every month or so. So we had to reassign our resources, I suppose, in the company. First of all, to deal with cancellations, and then also to work out how we were going to make up for the shortfall of bookings. And the first thing we did, we had a brainstorm, and we decided to build a new feature that would enable customers to purchase a bespoke music video from the site. So we knew we had all these musicians, great musicians, sitting at home doing nothing, and we had lots of customers who were probably feeling quite unsettled by the pandemic and wanting to be able to celebrate special occasions with their loved ones with some music. So we decided to put two and two together and allow the customers to purchase music videos from musicians. And it's really taken off, and we've had hundreds of videos being bought and thousands of pounds generated for musicians. We also decided to include from the outset a donation to the NHS included with every video. So part of the project, I suppose, was in response to everything going crazy with the pandemic. How can we help musicians, but also how can we help those people on the front line who are dealing with the COVID crisis? So that's the feature that we've most recently launched. But we're also looking into building a platform for music teaching online to help with that side of things. So a Zoom-like service that works for music teachers, good audio quality and good protection for teaching children, safeguarding measures. So those are the kind of two things we're working on at the moment, but still our primary focus is on live bookings. It's just a matter of adapting to the fact that there aren't many live bookings taking place at the moment, and to making sure that we survive until after the pandemic and that our musicians can continue to make a living until after the pandemic, and continue getting bookings, I suppose, for 2021, 2022, when it looks like things will be a bit better.
I noticed there was a few, I was getting a few more alerts with gigs coming up for, certainly next year and the year after. So do you find that's what's happening now? People are starting to sort of book a bit more, like have a bit more confidence in the booking ahead?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every week our CEO James kind of reports on the number of inquiries that are coming in and shows us a graph, and that has been steadily increasing, which is encouraging. The biggest dip was, as you'd expect, immediately after the pandemic was announced. But we're seeing more and more people returning to their laptops and mobiles, I suppose, and looking for musicians for their weddings. One concern I think that we have, and probably a lot of people in the events community have, is that 2021 is going to become incredibly packed with bookings, because you'll have lots of people postponing their bookings for this summer into 2021, as well as the pre-existing 2021 bookings. So it's yet to be seen what the kind of outlook, I suppose, for 2021 bookings will be. But certainly in the kind of the short term, the last few weeks, we've begun to see bookings pick up, which is encouraging.
Have you seen a dip in the fees at the moment? Because that's what's been happening, I guess, with the live scene, certainly here, and what I've seen in the UK, where gigs can happen again outdoors, that because of the reduced capacity venues have now, that the fees are going down as well. Have you noticed that, or is it still the same?
Well, as I mentioned before, we have a minimum rate at which a musician can go out and perform a booking. So we haven't seen that drop on a kind of per musician scale. But obviously the purchasing power of customers, the average person in the UK at the moment, has gone down. People are less likely to splash out, say, on a band for their granny's 80th birthday party in December when things are so uncertain. So those sort of one-off bookings have definitely been hit. Birthday parties, anything, I suppose, involving people over the age of 60 or in that kind of vulnerable category. And also corporate bookings, which for some musicians are the biggest earners, have also dropped out of the kind of the market, because companies aren't spending money in the way they used to on putting on big functions for their clients and hiring, say, like a 12-piece show band. Fewer bookings, and bookings that contain a fewer number of musicians as well, I guess, are the kind of trends we're seeing at the moment, which, as you say, does result in less money available for musicians. So that's why we're trying to provide these other avenues to make up for the shortfall.
And the personalised music messages, which you were talking about earlier, so is that still an appetite for that now things have opened up, or was that just more of a thing that happened when everything was in the middle of the lockdown?
it was definitely launched as a response to a particular moment in time, which was a crisis point when lockdown was introduced. Nobody knew what was going to happen, and that was when we were getting hundreds of requests coming in for these videos. Now people can meet up with their friends in limited circumstances. There's perhaps less of an appetite for that. We're seeing some bookings for musicians in a distanced way. So we've had a bagpiper booked for a care home, for example. A bagpiper can perform outside. It's very loud, as I'm sure you know. So these sorts of live bookings can work in a limited way now. And that means that something like our personalized music messages, though we're still getting bookings coming in for them, there's a little bit of a drop in demand for that now that things are beginning to open up.
Okay, so I'm watching this now. I'm a musician, and I'm thinking, wow, yeah, I want to get involved in this. So what's the best way of maximizing my potential with Encore as a musician? So how do I go about it? What are the things that you look for? What are the things that the top earners, if you like, what are they doing right?
Yeah, there's a few things. First of all, I should mention Encore's free to sign up for any musician. It's at that point that we begin to vet our musicians to sort out which ones are worthy of being at the top of our rankings and which ones need a bit more work, which profiles need a bit more work before we begin recommending them to customers. But the things that the very best musicians are doing, number one, first and foremost, it's about really high quality promo materials. So if you're sitting at home and you don't have a professionally produced showreel or professional photographs, you're probably losing out on a decent chunk of booking opportunities because the very top tier of musicians have those. They do cost £800, £1,000, maybe £2,000 if it's a band, but usually that money will be made up within the space of a couple of bookings. So I would see it very much as a return on investment and an investment in your future booking potential. So that's what I'd be thinking about. If you're not able to access a professional videographer at the moment, you might want to consider borrowing a camera or trying to work out how to do that by yourself at where you're living at the moment and producing perhaps a few short videos. If you're a band, an acoustic setup, a reduced setup. If you're a soloist, maybe just a few kind of acoustic numbers can help to boost your profile, given that you can't necessarily get those professional promo showreels done right now. But that's probably number one. Number two, I would say, is having a really good repertoire. Again, that's something you could be working on right now if you wanted to. You could be looking at what types of pieces are being played on the radio, what's being played in the charts, do some research, have a look at videos of the top musicians on Encore or the top musicians of any other agency that you find on the internet, and make sure that you have those pieces within your repertoire, because we always speak to customers on the phone and a lot of them will have a particular piece in mind, particularly if it's a wedding, and they'll want to know you can play it. And for us, if we're speaking to the customer, it makes it much easier for us to sell you in to that customer. If we can say, yep, I can see on their repertoire they can play Stevie Wonder or whatever. So getting that promo and repertoire list sorted is really important. And then I'd say probably the third thing is communication and making sure that you're timely and professional in the way that you communicate with customers. We have some bands, maybe they don't have the best promotional material ever, and they're still starting out with their repertoire. But if you can be quick and polite and helpful in your messages to customers, then that massively improves your chances. And that's something you can do without investing any money. That's something you can do by perhaps reading about sales techniques, how to speak to people in a way that allows them to understand exactly what you offer, laying out clearly your pricing, DJ services, any other of those kind of logistical things that are probably questions in the background of a customer's mind. If you can remove those, they're going to be in a state where they're much more likely to consider you as someone they'd like to book. So yeah, probably those would be the three main things I'd recommend: the promo, extensive repertoire list, and making sure your every message you send to a client is really heavily optimized towards encouraging them to book you. That's probably what I recommend. And they're things you could be working on right now, even if you've got no bookings coming in, even if you're stuck at home isolating. So that'd be my recommendation.
Great. And what, as an agency, so it's free to join. So how what is the agency? What does the agency take, and what does the musician take home?
Sure. From the outset, we wanted to make sure we were super transparent about the way that we take commission. There are some agencies where you can't find the commission on the website. It's a bit shady. It changes based on the customer, changes based on the musician. But for us, it's always 20%. That's inclusive of VAT. We don't add VAT on top because we don't want to include any hidden costs. And when you send a quote to a customer, you see that 20% come out. So you can see how much we're getting, how much you're getting, and you can adjust your quote accordingly to make sure you're always getting what you need. But the best way to consider it, I suppose, is like a marketing cost. So think of it in a similar way as, say, some Facebook marketing or Google marketing you'd be doing. But obviously this comes with the added bonus of we have members of the team who'll be chasing up your customers and helping with the sales process. And as I mentioned before, we also have a secure payment system, which if you're using something like PayPal or other payment systems, that would be an additional cost to yourself. So that's how I think of the service fee. Yeah, this 20% is taken out of the fee. That's how it works.
Okay, and so what are the other? I think you've already covered a few, but what are the other benefits of using an agent? You know, if I was a musician, I'd go, well, I might think, oh, 20%, that's quite a lot. I'll do it myself. Or so, what's the benefits of going through Encore?
First one, I guess, would be reach. I was chatting to one of our most popular singers, a girl called Sarah, who has been incredibly successful on the platform, has managed to earn enough actually to buy a car as a result of being on Encore, which is great. She was saying it's about the reach. As someone, particularly, she was a solo singer starting out at the beginning of her career, she had many opportunities to play at gigs that she wouldn't have come across otherwise. So we have hundreds of customers coming in every day, posting open opportunities to Encore, which musicians can apply to. Then we have people who are also browsing our search pages, which is a traditional agency listing model, where they could be browsing the singers, for example, and come across Sarah and say, I want to book you, please can you provide a quote? So extended reach is a big one, I think, for a lot of musicians who use the platform. Then I guess having a sales team that does the selling in process for you, that's something that's particularly important to bands that use the platform, where you're dealing with a customer that might have a lot of questions around, sorry, saying my connection is unstable. I just wanted to check you can hear me okay.
I can, yeah. There are little glitches here and there, but that's fine. It's, yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay.
So yeah, I was just saying, so the second thing that musicians find useful, I think, is having a sales team who are on hand to explain all of those little details about bookings, particularly wedding bookings, that musicians don't necessarily want to go through every time they chat to a customer. So we have a couple of really great sales team members, Kiara and Joel, who will be assigned to your booking, and they'll call up and chat to the customer, encouraging them to book you, and they'll work out some of the logistics of the event and generally kind of oil the gears of the booking process to make sure like the client's hand is held from the moment they make the inquiry all the way to the moment when they enter their card details. And then I guess, yeah, finally, I suppose it's probably the security that comes with using an agency that a lot of musicians appreciate. We have a dispute resolution team. If there's ever some kind of disagreement at the event, who resolve that. I've actually been working on that today, resolving a dispute between a client and a customer. And I think a lot of people appreciate having an intermediary in that sense, a bit like a kind of insurance policy. And customers certainly prefer to book through agencies or platforms that offer that kind of support, because if you're booking a band for your wedding day, you want to know that the musician is going to turn up, and you want to know that if, God forbid, anything does happen, there is someone who's available to talk to and who will sort it out. So the security with payment, the security with cancellations, all these sorts of things are what come with working with an agency like Encore.
Yeah, and I can say, obviously, I've been a user of the platform myself, and I found it very easy process, very user friendly, the back end, and yeah, and I've also had experience of the people being supportive as well, the support staff, and I've actually had a few because generally people browse, don't they, and then they put out a post, and you bid, if you like, you throw your hat in the ring and say, yes, I'm available for that, and then it's up to the customer then who chooses the best fit for them. But I've also had a few instances where somebody said, this person's interested in this kind of thing, we put your name forward for it, so I haven't necessarily applied for it. Somebody from the team thought I was a good fit and put me forward for it, and got the gig that way. So that was I felt that was kind of a nice feature as well, of like, I wouldn't maybe have seen that gig, I wouldn't have noticed it, but because I've been on the platform and had some previous gigs, then somebody else on the team put me forward, so that was helpful.
Yeah, that's something we would do with some of our musicians that we've begun to develop relationships with. We've seen they've gone out and done booking successfully, like a traditional agency. Joel and Kiara, once they trust that the musician's going to do a great job, they'll begin to recommend you to customers proactively. So yeah, that's one of the benefits if you continue to get bookings through the platform.
So obviously the COVID thing has kind of thrown a spanner in the works, really, but what can you kind of see in terms of trends going forward? And what I mean by that, it could be anything you see, but like before the COVID thing, especially in the wedding market, there seems to be like like Mumford & Son bands seem to be quite popular, or like a demand for that kind of music. So I mean, in terms of that, do you see any trends or anything new that's coming up that people could maybe sort of aim at if they were wanting to get in the wedding market? What's the most popular things people are looking for in terms of style of music and things?
Definitely Mumford & Sons bands are popular at the moment. I think that's less to do with COVID and more to do with a certain cohort of people who grew up listening to Mumford & Sons bands coming of age and having their weddings at the moment. But I think if you're thinking about how you can develop your act to be COVID friendly, you want to be thinking about how you can perform outdoors. If you're a band, that means being able to offer some kind of unplugged acoustic option. A lot of bands will be able to play maybe like with a drum kit strapped to the drummer, acoustic guitar, upright bass. That's a really popular group type at the moment. So if you're usually an electric band, think about ways that you can do that outside, perhaps at a wedding reception if it's outdoors and no one can be inside together. So there's those types of options. We've seen some musicians be successful actually offering virtual performances. Excuse me. We have a guitarist who's called John, virtuosic flamenco guitarist, and he's been booked a number of times for corporate gigs, pretty well paid actually, to give a virtual Zoom performance. Obviously this won't be suitable for every musician type, but if you can perform well as a standalone musician, you might want to consider learning how to produce those kinds of setups and those kinds of virtual performances, because there is some money available there. It's typically companies that have a budget available for entertaining their employees. They would usually be spending that on events, putting on drinks. Now everyone's stuck at home at their desks, so they think, well, we can do something new, something novel. How about we get in a guitarist to give a performance over Zoom? So maybe have a think about whether you can adapt some of your performance options to virtual performances. Yeah, I'd say that market is a little bit more limited and a little bit more niche though. So I'd be focusing right now on how you can have a COVID-friendly option for live events, and also think about how you can advertise that on your website or on your Encore profile to clients, because many of those who are browsing will be thinking about events within the next few months, and no one knows what's going to be happening. So if someone knows that you can perform outdoors, if in 2 months' time there's another spike and the government says you can only hold events outside, then that customer knows they can book you with confidence, knowing that it's not going to be cooled off. So that's definitely a trend, I would say, those kind of acoustic options. Yeah, you could be looking at how you can attract customers by offering that sort of performance option.
Great stuff. Well, that makes perfect sense. And I think I had an inquiry as well recently of they're saying, oh, well, if it gets called off, are you? Yeah, they were asking basically for more flexibility. We've got this date, but it might work, it might not. Does that work for you? So I guess maybe that's another thing as well about being more flexible in dates, and maybe that affects contracts a bit more, because obviously in the past a date would be pretty fixed. It'd be pretty key to have the date fixed in, but then obviously things force majeure might change that. Right?
We've been experimenting actually with a few different contract options during the coronavirus period in order to make it easier for customers to change dates, while also making sure musicians don't lose out on their deposits. We're actually about to update this, so this might not be up-to-date information when someone watches this video, but certainly we've been trying to make it as easy as possible for any customer to be able to postpone their event. And I think what happens is we, as a business, take the hit. We reduce some of our commission in order to make sure the musician keeps their deposit, because we're trying to make sure musicians who are strapped for cash don't lose their deposits, which is their upfront payment. That's their their rent money, while also encouraging customers to book without being scared about losing money when, for whatever reason, if it's got COVID related, they have to cancel their event.
And how many musicians do you represent at the moment?
So there are about 20,000 musicians on our books, but I'd say it's more in the region of 5,000 musicians who are kind of regularly active, regularly getting bookings. As I say, it's free to join. So there are some musicians who I think have created a profile, they just want a presence online. They're perhaps not really pushing for bookings, whereas we have other musicians who are getting booked every week, have really put a lot of time and effort into making sure that their pricing and their repertoire and their promotional material is really on point. Yeah, and those are the musicians that appear at the top of our search rankings.
And at the moment, it's a UK-based agency. Do you have any plans of expanding, or are you staying in the UK?
We've definitely considered it, and we've had bookings in Ireland, the odd bookings in Europe as well, in Spain, France. But for the moment, we feel that there's enough complexity in the UK market to keep us busy for a while. And there are all sorts of bits of red tape and cultural understanding that we would need if we were to launch elsewhere, in Europe in particular. Probably the place that has the most potential is somewhere like Australia or even the US, where it's English speaking. It's perhaps easier to launch in those kind of locations. But yeah, absolutely, there's plenty of bookings going around in the UK at the moment. So our focus is here for the moment, where we have the best understanding of the market. And we won't be thinking about expanding during a pandemic. That would be a little bit of a risky thing to do. So yeah, expansion is something we'd like to do on the horizon, but that horizon is quite far off.
Yeah, just going back to the repertoire question came to me about, do you see any trends in that? Because I guess sometimes there's different songs that are more popular than others, and I guess songs come in and out. But so are there ever, do you notice like new songs coming in, or like what are the kind of evergreen classics that people like, or what are the kind of new songs that people are after?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few kind of songs that just come up all the time in show reels and are always chosen by customers. I'd say there's kind of like an average customer type who generally would want maybe some Ed Sheeran or Christina Perri, or Adele. If you've got their biggest hits under your belt, then you're in a good position, particularly for performing as the bride is coming into a wedding, or maybe performing some covers in the background for a corporate event. Those are the kinds of tunes that your average person on the street in the UK at the moment will instantly recognise, and you want to be able to provide that kind of recognition factor for people that perhaps aren't so used to seeing live music. So it's great to have those under your belt. With customers who are perhaps a little bit more musically engaged, let's say, I think there's a tendency at the moment for people to want Motown classics. So have a look at the back catalogues of Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder. Aim to have some of those songs down. And as you mentioned as well, Mumford & Sons songs are really popular. Similarly with those types of customers who want something a little bit different and don't just want your average pop songs that you're likely to hear on, I don't know, covered by an X Factor singer. So yeah, I'd aim to make sure you know the pop songs that are being played on the charts at the moment, or within the last 10 years probably, actually. And then think about Motown and folk rock as two perhaps areas to look into if you're a band.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Jonny, to talk to you about Encore, and so if I'm watching this as a musician, how do I get involved with Encore? How do I upload my stuff, and where do I go?
Sure, you can head to encoremusicians.com/musician, and if you enter in your email address there, you can get started and create an account. You don't actually need to have all your promotional materials ready when you're creating the account. Once you create the account, you can then add on different profiles to that. So you could add on a solo profile for your solo work, and a Motown band for your Motown band work. But yeah, head to encoremusicians/musician and follow the steps there, and you can sign up really easily.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your time, and thanks for your for explaining all that. And I hope the market picks up, and I hope we're all back as it was. It sounds like maybe 2021 might be like a bit of a drought now, but maybe a bit of a flood when it comes to 2021. But
yeah, absolutely. Touch wood. There's no additional spikes, but I'm quietly optimistic that there'll be a big bounce back once things are beginning to lift. Everyone loves live music. Everyone wants to be able to celebrate with their friends, and I think even more so after a period where they've not been able to do that for a while. So I'm hoping for a bit of a bounce back in live music next year. Fingers crossed.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jonny.
Thanks so much for having me, Spence. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.